Before we begin tonight, I need to ask you something. When was the last time you checked the lock on your door? When was the last time you looked over your shoulder in an empty hallway? Because after what I'm about to share with you, you'll never feel quite the same about being alone. What I'm about to tell you are 5 true stories. 5 accounts from real people who encountered something that shattered their sense of safety forever. These aren't legends. These aren't campfire tales passed down through generations. These are things that happen to ordinary people in ordinary places doing ordinary things. A teacher talking to someone who wasn't there. A young woman stalked by a man who'd killed before. A child who found something in the woods that no child should ever see. A student watched by someone who shouldn't have been able to enter a locked room. And a person terrorized in their own home by a neighbor who won't stop. Tonight you're going to hear their stories. And I promise you by the end you'll understand why some doors should never be opened, why some strangers should never be trusted, and why sometimes the most terrifying thing in the world is realizing that you're not as safe as you thought you were. If you're ready, let's begin. But first, if you enjoy stories that keep you awake at night, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for silent fear. Leave a comment telling me which story disturbed you the most. And if you're brave enough to make it to the end, well, you'll understand why some nightmares never really end. Now let me tell you about the man who wasn't there. Story 1 begins. I received this account from a teacher who's been working in education for 6 years. She wanted to remain anonymous, so we'll call her Sarah. Sarah teaches 8th grade English, and she wanted me to know something up front. She actually loves her job. She knows that's not something teachers are supposed to admit anymore, but it's the truth. She loves the kids, the work, the rhythm of the school year. For 6 years, nothing about her job had ever truly frightened her. Until parent-teacher night last November. Let me set the scene for you. Parent-teacher conferences at Sarah's school run from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock in the evening. It's a simple, predictable system. Parents have 15-minute appointment slots. They cycle through. Sarah sits at her desk. The parents sit across from her. They discuss the child's progress. The parents leave. The next ones arrive. Routine. Safe. Normal. That particular night, Sarah had 11 appointments scheduled with about 40 minutes of scattered breaks sprinkled throughout the evening. Just a standard night. The first few meetings went exactly as expected. The Petersons came and discussed their daughter's reading comprehension. The Millers expressed concern about their son's participation in class discussions. Then there was a father named Carl, who spent 25 minutes talking nonstop about his son's untapped potential and needed to be gently redirected twice to stay on topic. But still just a normal evening. Sarah's 6:30 time slot was empty, so she got up from her desk and walked down the hall to the faculty bathroom. By this time, the school had settled into that particular kind of quiet that only happens in buildings designed to hold hundreds of people when they were mostly empty. A few other classrooms still glowed with light. Distant voices echoed somewhere. But mostly there was just this heavy pressing stillness. Sarah used the bathroom and started walking back to her classroom. That's when she noticed something odd. The supply closet door at the end of the hall was slightly open. Now this is important. That door has been locked for the entire 3 years Sarah has been teaching in that wing. The handle doesn't even turn from the outside. She knows this because she's accidentally tried it hundreds of times over the years, thinking it was the bathroom door. But now, on this particular evening, it was open, maybe 4 inches, just enough to see darkness inside. As Sarah walked past the closet, she heard something. Movement. Definite movement from inside the darkness. She stopped. Her hand reached out, just one finger extended, and pushed the door open wider. What she saw froze her blood. A man was standing in the back corner of that supply closet, positioned behind a metal shelf unit. He was tall, probably in his 50s, wearing a dark jacket. And here's the detail that Sarah can't forget. He was completely still. Not moving, just standing there in the darkness, looking directly at her. And based on the settled, arranged way he was positioned, not like someone who'd been caught in the middle of doing something, but carefully placed, waiting. Sarah knew immediately that he'd been standing there for some time, like someone who had been waiting for something or someone. Sarah stepped back from the doorway. Her heart was pounding in a way she hadn't felt since she was a child. That pure, instinctive fear response. "Who are you?" she managed to ask, her voice shaken. "What are you doing in there?" The man didn't answer immediately. He just looked at her with this long, measuring stare. Sarah said later that his eyes seemed completely flat, emotionless, like looking at a wall. Then finally he spoke. His voice was calm, matter of fact. "I'm waiting for my appointment." Sarah's mind was racing. "Appointments are in the classrooms," she said, trying to keep her voice steady and professional. "What's your name?" "Henderson." Sarah's blood went cold when she heard that name. She did have a Henderson on her appointment list, her 7th slot at 7:15. A single father whose daughter Emma was one of her best students, quiet and hardworking. Sarah had never met this parent before, never had any contact with him. "That appointment isn't for another 40 minutes, Sarah said, checking her watch to confirm. "You're welcome to wait in the main hallway or the front lobby where other parents are gathered." The man's response was immediate, flat, and final. "I prefer to wait here." Sarah stood there in that empty hallway, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, staring at this man standing in the dark of a supply closet behind a shelf unit, and her mind was desperately trying to make sense of the situation. How had he gotten into a locked closet? How long had he been standing there in the darkness? Why would any version of this be acceptable, normal behavior for someone waiting for a parent-teacher conference? She couldn't work any of it out. None of it made sense. "I'm going to get someone from the front office," Sarah said, already backing away. "That's not necessary," the man said. The way he said it, so flat, so final, with this underlying tone that Sarah couldn't quite identify but that terrified her, made her turn and walk back to her classroom much faster than she wanted to admit. Sarah immediately pulled out her phone and texted the vice principal. She told her there was a man in the supply closet at the end of C Wing claiming to be a parent waiting for an appointment, and that something felt very, very wrong about the entire situation. The vice principal responded within seconds, saying she'd come right down. She arrived a few minutes later with the school's head of security, a former police officer named Mr. Torres. Sarah watched them walk down the hallway toward the supply closet. She watched them reach the door. The door was closed. When Mr. Torres tried the handle, it was locked. Completely locked. Same as it had been for years. He tried it again, putting his weight into it. Nothing. The door didn't budge. There was no sign that anyone had been there, no sign that the door had been opened at all. The vice principal walked back to Sarah with an expression that Sarah still can't fully read. Concern, skepticism, a mixture of both? She asked Sarah to describe the man again in detail. Sarah did. The vice principal wrote everything down in a small notebook. 7:15 came. 7:15 went. Nobody showed up for the Henderson appointment. After 8 o'clock, when all the conferences had wrapped up and the last parents had left, Sarah went to the front desk and asked the administrative assistant to pull the evening sign-in sheet. Every parent who'd come to the school that night was required to sign in at the front entrance, providing their name and the teacher they were visiting. The assistant handed Sarah the clipboard. Sarah scanned the list carefully. Every name was accounted for. Every parent she'd met with had signed in, except Henderson. There was no Henderson on the list. Nobody had signed in under that name all evening. The next morning, Sarah arrived at school early. She logged into the school system and looked up Emma Henderson's student file. Emma existed. She was real. 14 years old, 8th grade. Excellent student with perfect attendance. She had an ACO address on file, an emergency contact number, a complete academic record. Emergency contact was listed as her mother, a woman named Diane Henderson. And then Sarah saw the line that made her stop breathing. Father, deceased, date of death, 4 years prior. Sarah sat at her desk and stared at that screen for a long time. 4 years. Emma's father had been dead for 4 years. Sarah reported everything to the principal, who took it seriously enough to report it to the district office. The school's security team reviewed the camera footage from C Wing. The supply closet door is clearly visible in the hallway camera's field of view. Sarah was sent the footage. She's watched it 4 times now. The video shows her walking down the hallway, returning from the bathroom. It shows her stopping near the supply closet. It shows her reaching out and appearing to push something. It shows her stepping back. It shows her standing there in the hallway, clearly talking to someone, having a conversation for almost 2 full minutes. But the door never opens. Not once. Not even a crack. On the footage, Sarah is standing alone in an empty hallway, talking to a closed, locked door. Sarah told me she has no explanation for what happened. She knows what she saw. She knows what the man said. She wasn't imagining it. She was stone cold sober at 5:30 on a Tuesday evening in a well-lit hallway, and she's never hallucinated anything in her entire life. She doesn't do drugs. She rarely drinks. She has no history of mental health issues. The supply closet was professionally inspected by the facilities department. They confirmed there was no alternate entry point, no exit point, no hidden passages or panels. The door is the only way in or out. And according to their records, it had been continuously locked since the previous school year. Nobody had accessed it in months. Emma Henderson still sits in the 3rd row of Sarah's English class. She's still a good kid, still quiet, still works hard, still gets excellent grades. Sarah has never said anything to her about that night. She doesn't think she ever will. What would she even say? But Sarah told me that sometimes when she's walking that hallway after hours, grading papers or preparing for the next day's lessons, she gives that supply closet door a very wide berth, just in case. Because the question that haunts Sarah, the question she can't answer, is this. If Emma's father has been dead for 4 years, who was the man standing in that closet? And more importantly, what was he waiting for? Story 2 begins. The next story comes from a young woman I'll call Emily. She's 23 years old now and lives in Kentucky. This happened to her in the summer of 2018, when she was working her way through college with whatever jobs she could find. That's how Emily ended up working at a gym located in the middle of absolutely nowhere. The place was surrounded by nothing but an abandoned retirement home, a gas station, and several miles of empty road before you'd reach the nearest Target or CVS. The location was sketchy, Emily admits, but the gym itself was pretty modern and seemed safe enough at first glance. Let me describe the layout because it matters. There's a front desk with a narrow hallway leading back. The first floor houses the men's dressing rooms, treadmills, and weight machines. The third floor has the women's facilities and everything else. Yoga studio, more cardio equipment, stretching areas. One night, Emily and her 17-year-old co-worker were the only staff members left to close up. There were still quite a few people working out when they made their closing announcement over the intercom system. The gym would be closing in 20 minutes. Please finish your workouts and prepare to leave. People started filtering out in small groups, checking out, grabbing their bags, heading to their cars. Except for one guy. He was still on a treadmill on the first floor, headphones firmly in his ears, running steadily like he hadn't heard a word of the announcement. Emily walked over and gently tapped his shoulder. "Hey, excuse me, we're closing soon." The man stopped running, smiled at Emily, nodded in acknowledgement, then asked her what her name was. Emily told him, smiling back, trying to maintain that professional customer service demeanor that the job required. That's when his face changed. The smile dropped away like someone had flipped a switch. His expression went completely flat. "Well, Emily," he said, his voice void of any emotion, "if you don't blow me right now, I'm not going anywhere. So screw off." Emily froze. She was completely shocked, her mind unable to process what she just heard. But underneath the shock, she was also scared. Really scared. So she made the decision to just walk away, leave him alone, let him finish his workout until closing time. Don't engage, don't escalate. She found her co-worker in the equipment room and told him what had just happened. He suggested they call their supervisor immediately. When Emily called, her supervisor's response was not what she expected. "Keep the gym open until he leaves," she said. "He probably won't stay long. You'll get paid overtime for however long it takes." So Emily and her teenage co-worker waited. They did busy work, cleaning machines, organizing towels, trying to look occupied. Everyone else left, everyone except this one man. Let me give you some context about this individual, because Emily described him in detail. He was approximately 6 feet 4 inches tall, broad-shouldered, built like someone who'd spent a lot of time in gyms, but recently stopped caring. He wore a black sweatsuit. He looked rough, not clean-cut at all, like someone who'd stopped maintaining basic hygiene. And he smelled strongly of alcohol mixed with old sweat, that sour scent that hits you from several feet away. And here were Emily and this 5'3" high school kid, growing more frightened by the minute as this man continued his workout long past closing time. After about 45 minutes past their normal closing time, Emily's co-worker went upstairs to clean out the women's dressing rooms. Emily stayed at the front desk, going through the motions of end-of-night procedures, trying to look busy and professional. That's when she heard heavy footsteps coming down the stairs. The man finished his workout. He checked out at the front desk, scanning his membership card. But instead of leaving, he stayed, leaned against the counter, started chatting with Emily. "Sorry about earlier," he said, his tone almost casual, like he was apologizing for bumping into her accidentally. "I just don't like when women boss me around." Then he asked for Emily's phone number. Emily's mind raced. She needed an excuse, something that would make him leave without causing a confrontation. "I have a boyfriend," she lied. "He's actually picking me up from work tonight." She hoped that would end it, hoped he would leave. He laughed. Actually laughed, this short, humorless sound. "If I kidnapped you," he said, leaning closer, "you'd be all mine. Nobody could stop me." Emily's hands were shaking. She gripped the edge of the desk to hide it. Then he said, quieter, like he was sharing a secret, "I've killed someone before. For a woman." Emily couldn't move, couldn't speak. Her body had completely frozen, every muscle locked in place, while her mind screamed at her to run, to do something, anything. But she just stood there as he kept talking, his words washing over her in this terrible, paralyzing wave. "I own you now," he said, his eyes fixed on her face. "I'm going to watch over you. You're mine." Then, as casually as if he'd just discussed the weather, he smiled, that empty smile again, said goodnight, and walked down the final set of stairs toward the front door. Emily heard the door open and close. She waited, listening to the silence, before she finally allowed herself to move. She went back to the equipment room where her coworker was finishing up, and she was basically in tears, shaking, trying to explain what had just happened. Here's where Emily made her mistake, and she knows it now, regrets it deeply. She should have immediately locked the front door behind him. She should have secured the building the second he left. But she was in shock, not thinking clearly, just going through the motions of close-in procedures on autopilot. About 30 minutes later, Emily was alone. Her coworker had finished his tasks and left through the side exit. Emily was doing the final walkthrough, checking that everything was turned off. All the equipment was put away. She headed down to the narrow corridor that led to the front door, ready to leave finally, ready to get out of there and never come back. In the darkness near the front desk, she saw someone crouching behind the counter. "Hey," Emily called out, her voice uncertain. "Are you still here?" No response. Complete silence. Emily took a step closer, squinting in the dim light. That's when the smell hit her. That overwhelming, unmistakable combination of sweat and alcohol and something else, something wrong. It was him. He'd never left. He'd been hiding there the entire time, crouched behind the desk in the darkness, waiting. Every instinct Emily had screamed at her to run. She didn't think. She just turned and bolted back up the stairs, taking them two at a time, running to the third floor, to the women's dressing room, slamming herself into a bathroom stall and locking the door with trembling hands. She pulled out her phone and texted her coworker, fingers barely able to type the message. His response made her blood turn to ice. "I already left like 10 minutes ago. Call the police right now." Emily dialed 911 with shaking hands and whispered into the phone, explaining the situation, giving them the gym's address, begging them to hurry. And while she sat there in that locked bathroom stall, hugging her knees to her chest, barely breathing, she heard footsteps. Heavy footsteps entering the women's dressing room. Then she heard his voice, calling out in the darkness. Emily. Just her name. Drawn out. Searching. She pressed herself against the wall of the stall and didn't make a sound. She stayed there, not moving, not breathing, for 20 minutes that felt like 20 hours, until finally she heard different voices, authoritative voices, and the sound of handcuffs clicking shut. The police arrested him right there in the gym. And here's the detail that still makes Emily's skin crawl. He wasn't lying. He hadn't been exaggerating or trying to scare her with empty threats. He really had killed someone before. The police confirmed it. He'd been convicted of gunning down a man several years prior, had served time, and was out on parole. The next day, Emily handed in her 2 weeks' notice. After that, she only worked jobs in crowded, busy shopping malls where she was never alone, where there were always security guards nearby, where she could see all the exits at all times. Some people, Emily learned, don't deserve second chances or the benefit of the doubt. Some people are exactly as dangerous as they appear to be. And sometimes your gut instinct telling you to run is the only thing that keeps you alive. Story 3 begins. This next account is probably the most disturbing one I'll share tonight. It comes from someone who was just 12 years old when it happened, about 10 years ago. They wanted to remain completely anonymous, so I'll just share their story exactly as they told it to me. 10 years ago, this person developed an interest in bird watching. It wasn't anything official or organized. They were just a kid who enjoyed sneaking up on birds, taking pictures with a cheap camera, and looking the species up in library books afterward. They made themselves a checklist with pictures they'd printed from the library computer showing all the native bird species in their region. Every weekend, they'd wander around their neighborhood searching for new birds to photograph and identify. Their neighborhood was one of those suburban areas that abruptly transitions into wilderness. Neat houses and lawns suddenly giving way to large plots of land covered in brush and trees. There were a few ponds in the area and one large creek, which meant lots of bird activity. Within the first few weeks of this new hobby, they managed to spot quite a few different species. But there was one bird that became an obsession, a white whale of sorts, the black vulture. Their area had tons of turkey vultures. They were everywhere, incredibly common. But black vultures were rare in that region. The two species are hard to tell apart when they're flying high overhead. The best way to distinguish them is by checking the pattern of gray and white on their wings. If you can get close enough, you can eventually make out the distinctive red head of a turkey vulture, which this kid did many times, each time feeling disappointed that it wasn't the rarer black vulture they were searching for. They can't remember the exact date now. Sometime in the fall, they think. But one weekend, they decided to dedicate 2 full days to searching for a black vulture. They were determined. They climbed over the small wire fencing around a nearby brushy area, ignoring the keep-out signs like they usually did, and started their search. Usually the best strategy for finding scavenger birds was to locate roadkill. There was a small 2-lane road that wound through the area, running parallel to the creek, and it was a perfect spot. The road was narrow, with trees and undergrowth choking both sides. In some places, the leaves from trees on either side intertwined overhead, creating these dark green tunnels that barely let sunlight through. It was incredibly easy for a deer or other animal to jump out in front of a car in those spots, neither the driver nor the animal realizing the danger until it was too late. As sad as it was to see dead deer and possums on the side of the road, it was a common occurrence. And where there was roadkill, there were usually vultures. The first part of the search didn't yield much. A few crows picking at what was left of a squirrel. Some ducks swimming lazily in the creek. Nothing major. It started getting late, the sun beginning its descent. But this kid was determined. They decided to push forward to the small park at the end of the road, then head home before it got truly dark. That's when they saw it. A large bird circling in the sky. Just the right shape and size to be a vulture. But with the fading sunlight, it was impossible to check the feather patterns from that distance, so they followed it, watching as it slowly, gradually descended in wide, lazy circles. After about 10 minutes, the bird landed somewhere ahead. The kid crept forward as carefully as possible, avoiding any sticks or debris that might snap and alert the bird. They stayed low to the ground, moving slowly, realizing that the bird had landed in a small clearing at the far end of the park, just an open field that tilted down a steep hill, with the parking lot positioned at the top. They approached from the bottom of the hill, excitement building when they heard multiple squawks and shrieks. More than one bird. Black vultures are more aggressive and territorial than turkey vultures. Maybe they'd stumbled onto birds fighting over food, a rare opportunity to observe interesting behavior. They reached the edge of the clearing and pulled out their binoculars. Two things registered at almost the exact same moment. First, it was strange that the birds were in the middle of an open park field rather than near the road where you'd expect to find roadkill. Though, they reasoned, animals can die anywhere. Maybe a deer had wandered out here and collapsed. Second, the smell. It was awful. Not like anything they'd smelled before, sharp, coppery, thick in the air, like when you pull spoiled ground meat from a grocery bag that's been sitting in a hot car. They'd smelled roadkill before, especially on hot summer days, but nothing like this. This was different. Worse. When they put the binoculars to their eyes, they expected to see a deer carcass with birds fighting over it. They never, in a million years, expected to see a human corpse. But that's exactly what was there. The birds were gathered around and on top of the body of a naked woman lying in the grass. For a split second, there was still that faint flash of excitement in the kid's mind. The automatic recognition that yes, one of the birds had the distinctive head shape of a black vulture. They'd finally found one. Before the full image registered and completely destroyed them. The woman was lying on her back in the grass. The birds hadn't done too much damage to her body yet. She appeared to have cuts or wounds, but most of her was still intact. What wasn't intact, the birds were actively working on. Her eyes, her lips, other places that the kid's mind still refuses to fully process, even now, 10 years later. She was pale, almost blue in certain places. She had blonde hair, matted and spread around her head in the grass. The kid sat there, they have no idea for how long, completely frozen, unable to look away, unable to move, as the sun continued sinking behind the trees and the light faded around them. This was before smartphones were ubiquitous. This kid didn't have a cell phone. They had a long hike back home ahead of them. They realized now they were in shock. Their body and mind had temporarily shut down. The only thing that finally made them move was the sudden, terrifying thought that whoever had done this to the woman might still be nearby, might be watching from the trees, might be waiting to see if anyone discovered the body. That thought broke through the paralysis. The kid forced themselves to slowly back away into the trees, moving in a low crouch, not taking their eyes off the scene for even a second. They were terrified to turn around, convinced that if they did, someone would be standing right behind them. They thought if they just kept backing up, moving backward forever into the safety of the woods, maybe nothing bad would happen. The light was fading to dusk when suddenly there was a new light. Headlights beaming from the top of the hill from the parking lot. The kid heard the screech of tires as a vehicle wheeled around sharply and sped off down the road, heading in the opposite direction from where the kid lived. That was the final straw. The kid ran. They ran the entire way back, crashing through at least a mile of brush and undergrowth. They had boots on and thick jeans, which protected their legs, but their arms were bare and got torn up by branches and thorns. By the time they stopped running, their arms were bleeding from dozens of small cuts. They paused midway through the brush behind their house, catching their breath, and realized with embarrassment that at some point during the terror, they'd wet themselves. They crawled the rest of the way through neighbors' yards to reach their house, avoiding the street, terrified of every passing car they heard. The horror didn't end when they got home. Their mother worked late shifts at a diner and wouldn't be back until past midnight. The kid was home, alone. This is the part they regret most deeply, they told me. They didn't call the police right away. They didn't call their mother. They were afraid, stupidly, irrationally afraid, that if they did, their mother would be angry, would never let them go outside alone again, or worse, that the police wouldn't believe them, that they'd think a 12-year-old was making up stories. So they locked every door in the house, double-checked them all, took a quick shower, washing off the dirt and blood and fear, then locked themselves in their bedroom and somehow, impossibly, fell asleep. When their mother came home past midnight, the kid was already asleep. They confronted her the next morning, told her everything through tears and shaking hands. They called the police together. But by then, the body had already been found. Someone else had discovered it overnight or early that morning. The police took the kid's statement, asked them questions, wrote everything down. They never got a follow-up call, never heard anything more about it. The kid stopped birdwatching after that day, completely stopped. They've tried many times over the years to find news articles or reports about the incident. They've searched online using every combination of keywords they can think of. They've never found anything. It probably doesn't help that they can't remember the exact date. They told me something else that I found striking. They have a lot of missing memories from ages 12 to 14. Large chunks of time they just can't account for, can't remember at all. They have no idea why. Trauma response, maybe. Their brain protecting them? But this memory, finding that woman's body in the park, remains crystal clear. Like it happened yesterday. They can pull up every detail with perfect clarity. The color of the grass, the sound the birds were making, the smell, the way the woman's hair looked spread out around her head. Some images, they told me, never fade. No matter how much time passes, no matter how hard you try to forget. They've never shared this story with anyone outside their immediate family until now. They said it felt therapeutic to write it down, to share it anonymously, to know that someone else finally knows what they saw that day. Some things you witness as a child change you forever, shape who you become, create boundaries in your mind about what the world really is versus what you thought it was. That kid learned something that day in the park, something that no 12-year-old should have to learn, that evil is real, that horrible things happen to innocent people, and that sometimes you stumble into nightmares you can never wake up from. Story 4 begins. This next story takes place in a high school. It was submitted by a student who was a junior when this happened, and they've told maybe 3 people about it in person, because every time they do, those people either don't believe them or they try to make it into something bigger than the student wants it to be. So they wrote it down instead. At least that way they said they could get all the details exactly right. This happened on a Thursday afternoon. The student, we'll call them Alex, stayed late to finish a history project. The computer lab, room 214 on the second floor of the East Wing, had an open hours policy. Students could use it after school as long as a teacher was present to supervise. Mr. Finch from the history department had volunteered to stay and let Alex work, which was genuinely nice of him. Alex arrived around 3:30 in the afternoon and settled in, getting into the zone, making good progress on the project. The problem was that Mr. Finch had somewhere he needed to be at 5 o'clock. Alex wasn't finished yet, still had at least another hour of work ahead. Mr. Finch said it was fine. He handed Alex the key to the computer lab and told them to lock up when finished and drop the key in the main office mail slot on the way out. Alex agreed. Mr. Finch left. And this is the moment that Alex has replayed in their mind countless times since, sitting there alone in the computer lab at 5:15 on a Thursday afternoon, door locked from the inside for security. The hallway outside gradually going dark and quiet as the last few people, other teachers, cleaning staff, a handful of students, cleared out of the building for the day. Alex had headphones in, music playing, genuinely focused on finishing the history project. Not thinking about much else, not worried, just working. Alex finished up around 6, maybe 6:15. Started the usual end of sessions routine, saving files, shutting down the computer, packing supplies into their backpack. The computer lab has one of those narrow vertical windows built into the door, maybe 4 inches wide, just enough to see out into the hallway. Alex wasn't paying particular attention to it, just going through the motions, until something made them look up. They don't know what exactly. Just one of those random moments where your eyes go somewhere without you consciously directing them. Alex looked at the door window. Coach Briggs was in the hallway. Coach Briggs was the gym teacher. Mid-50s, stocky build, crew cut. He'd been at the school for as long as anyone could remember. Alex had him for a gym class freshman and sophomore year. Standard experience, nothing remarkable. Coach Briggs was tough on the kids who didn't try, but fair overall. Nothing Alex had ever thought twice about. But now Coach Briggs was walking slowly down the hallway outside the computer lab, looking at each classroom door as he passed. Alex watched through the narrow window, curious. Coach Briggs stopped at the classroom 2 doors down from the lab. Tried the handle, the door was locked. He moved on. Tried the next door, also locked. Then the classroom directly next to the lab. Locked. Then he was at Alex's door. Alex pushed their chair back from the desk, instinctively, suddenly feeling exposed, even though they were across the room. The handle turned, caught on the lock, released. Alex was behind a bank of computer monitors now, and they weren't breathing. Coach Briggs put his face close to the narrow window, peering into the darkened lab. The only light inside came from the glow of one computer Alex hadn't shut down yet. Alex was hidden behind the monitors. They genuinely don't know if Coach Briggs could see them or not. Coach Briggs stood there with his face at that 4-inch window and looked into the room for what felt like an eternity. Probably 10 or 15 seconds in reality. His expression, Alex said, was completely neutral. Not searching exactly, not aggressive, not concerned, just looking. Taking in the room methodically. Then he moved on. Alex heard him try 2 more doors at the far end of the hallway, then silence. Then the sound of footsteps descending the main stairwell. Alex sat behind that monitor bank for 20 full minutes without moving a muscle. They want to emphasize that they weren't being overly dramatic or paranoid. They didn't feel dramatic. They felt like they just witnessed something they weren't supposed to see, and that moving too soon, making any noise, drawing any attention would be a genuinely terrible idea. So they sat there in the dark behind the monitors and waited. Waited until the building felt empty in a different way than it had before. A deeper kind of empty. Then finally, Alex grabbed their backpack and the lab key and made a decision. Instead of taking the main stairwell that Coach Briggs had used, they went to the back stairwell at the other end of the wing. Took it all the way down to the ground floor exit that leads out near the faculty parking lot. They pushed through the heavy door into the cold evening air and started walking quickly toward the student parking lot where their car was parked. Alex was almost there, maybe 20 yards from their car, when something, intuition, peripheral vision, they don't know what, made them look back up at the building. 2nd floor, east wing, the computer lab window. Coach Briggs was standing there, looking down at them, not moving, not waving, not doing anything at all, just standing at the window of the room Alex had been in 20 minutes earlier, the room Alex had locked behind them, watching Alex cross the parking lot. Alex has no explanation for how Coach Briggs got into that room. Alex had the only key. The only key. Alex got in their car and drove. They called their mom from the road and told her everything that had happened. Their mother called the school the next morning, spoke directly to the principal. That afternoon, Alex gave their full account to the vice principal in his office, describing everything in detail. The vice principal said they would look into the matter. Coach Briggs was at school the following Monday teaching gym classes. Same as always, same routine, nothing different. The vice principal told Alex's mother that the matter had been handled internally and thanked her for bringing it to their attention. That's all the information they've ever received. Handled internally, whatever that means. Alex still has 1 semester left at that high school. They have gym class this semester. They have Coach Briggs as their teacher. Alex sits in the back of the gym during class, keeps their head down, does their required laps and exercises, acts like nothing ever happened. Coach Briggs has never said anything to Alex about that night. Never acknowledged it, never looked at them differently as far as Alex can tell. That almost makes it worse, Alex said. The complete lack of acknowledgement. The fact that they're expected to just continue on as if nothing strange occurred. Alex keeps thinking about the key, about Coach Briggs standing in that locked room, about the fact that they've never gotten an explanation for how that's physically possible, and probably never will. And Alex thinks about the other 15 or 20 kids who were in classrooms along that hallway who finished their work and went home before Alex did, never knowing that someone was quietly trying every single door behind them, checking which rooms were occupied and which were empty. Alex wonders what would have happened if they hadn't locked the door. What would have happened if they'd looked up and seen Coach Briggs walking into the lab instead of just trying the handle? They don't have answers. Just questions that keep them awake sometimes. And one semester left before graduation.